Welcome to the Justice Room. Your life, your rights, your options. Experience and learn from discussions with legal professionals and other experts about the law, its challenges, and how it could affect you. Here at the Justice Room. Welcome to the Justice Room. Welcome to the Justice Room. This is your host, Jay Chacombe. Today we've brought in Mr. Bill Orth, William Orth from the Law Offices of William Orth. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about some upcoming changes in the law in family law cases.
Yes.
That are going to be changing, actually, from what you've told me, really soon. We're talking about July 1st.
Yeah, there are some changes that are going to go into effect on July 1st, and then there's other changes that will go into effect on October 1st.
Well, let's talk about the one that's predominantly important right now, July 1st. What does that change?
Those deal with alimony. Basically, what the new statute has done is, a bunch of things, actually. What the first thing, the most important thing that the court's going to have to determine is, with the parties in a divorce action, is number one, whether there's a need for alimony, and two, whether there's an ability to pay. Now, that kind of fits into the length of the marriage, which is an important consideration. What the statute has done is it's actually separated out marriage times, and they've defined if a marriage is less than 7 years, they've defined it as a short-term marriage. Moderate is from 7 years to 17. And a long-term marriage is 17 or greater.
Oh. So now, you're saying that if you've been in a short-term marriage, tell me if I'm wrong, and you've been married for 7 years, is that right? 7 years or less?
7 years or less, correct.
You're only you would only be required to pay 7 years of alimony or less?
Well, that's not necessarily the case. Now, what they've done in defining the years of marriage in terms of the short-term, moderate, long-term, it's very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to get alimony in a short-term marriage, which is defined as a short-term marriage. There's 4 types of alimony in the statute.
But let me ask you, on a short-term marriage, how is that different? Try to explain the difference between. You said it was going to be hard to get alimony on a short-term marriage. Is that still the case today? Is that the way it is now?
It is. I mean, it's harder to get alimony the last time you've been married, and the statute actually talks about whether or not alimony is applicable to what's called a short-term marriage, and in exceptional circumstances, the court may award some form of alimony, one of the 4 types of alimony that are in the new statute.
And what are the 4 types?
The 4 types are, there's bridge the gap alimony, which the concept of bridge the gap alimony has existed for a long time, but now it's actually codified in the law. Bridge the gap is basically, the best way to describe that alimony is it's to provide somebody with a short term, it's not a permanent alimony type situation. It's a temporary situation, and it's designed to help the party receiving the alimony basically transition from married life to single life from a financial perspective.
All right, and that's the direction I was kind of thinking it was going through, more of a transition.
Right, and then there's also rehabilitative alimony. There is, and that is the best way to describe that type of alimony is that there has to be a specific plan in place in terms of rehabilitative, in the sense that it's providing someone assistance to either go to school and become more current in a trade that they're degreed in or that they've done before, or to learn a new trade, to become self-sufficient, essentially.
Maybe that applies to a spouse or a party, whoever the recipient of the alimony is, that was maybe a stay-at-home mom that didn't work,
right?
And now she has to get back out into the marketplace.
There's circumstances where you might have someone who stayed at home with the kids to raise children, but prior to doing so, they worked in accounting as a bookkeeper. Well, they've been out of the accounting field for a certain number of years, 15 years, for instance, and they need help to get back into the field. There's retraining that needs to be done, things of that nature. The third type of alimony is a brand new type of alimony, and that's called durational alimony or duration alimony. And then the 4th type is permanent alimony, which we have permanent alimony now.
Yeah.
And that deals more with permanent alimony is you're going to see more in circumstances of a long-term marriage. Duration alimony is the brand new type of another brand new type of alimony, but it's never been dealt with before. Duration alimony is essentially designed to it lasts no longer than the term of years of the marriage, and you kind of referenced that earlier. Like if it's a 5-year marriage, you may not get more than 5 years worth of alimony. Well, that's duration alimony. How the new laws are applied on a fact basis remains to be seen by the courts.
How do they determine the amount of money that someone has to pay in an alimony case? Or is that going to change in this new law that's coming up as well?
No, that kind of goes back to what I first talked about, was the court needs to determine whether there's a need, and then number 2, whether there's an ability to pay. They're going to take a look at income from an individual. They also can now take a look at, and it's in the statute, they can take a look at the assets and the income a person receives off of assets in terms of their ability to pay alimony. So it's going to be different, obviously. If you've got a wide disparity in income between two parties, obviously it's easier to establish that need versus ability to pay. Whereas if you have a circumstance where you have one spouse makes $40,000 a year and the other spouse makes $70,000 a year, not a huge disparity in income. Not the situation where you've got someone making $150,000 a year and someone else makes $0 or $15,000 a year.
Okay. So now if you're I was going to use a Tiger Woods kind of as an example. I mean, he makes millions and millions of dollars a year. He's going through his personal situation. I mean, that would, I mean, of course, I'm not sure how it's all going to play out because nobody, I don't think, really knows right now. But there's probably some kind of alimony that's going to probably be in that case.
Yes.
So is it based on, say, his income? And how is that figured out?
It is based on his income, and you got to take a look at the lifestyle during the marriage. Let's take the Tiger Woods example. In that situation, you've got a couple who have a very different lifestyle than most of us have.
Right.
I mean, a very large amount of money coming into that household. So the wife in that instance is accustomed to a certain standard of living. You know, she's used to living in a big house in Islesworth. She's used to being able to take private jets.
Yeah.
She's used to being able to do certain things. That's a great example, although it's an extreme example of where you're going to see some. I mean, and in that case, honestly, I don't know that it would matter if they'd only been married 2 years.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, you would probably still see some sort of an alimony award.
But with the duration alimony that you referred to, would that come into play with this new law? I mean, if they've only, I don't recall when they got married, so I don't know exactly how long it's been since they've been married. But let's say it's been 5 years. Let's again, it's just an example. She's accustomed to that way of life. So will the duration alimony be a factor for this new law?
It depends on, and remember that two people.